Look at all this. Hey, oh, I got you. They think they're expecting food. Shit, we're going to get eaten alive.
Hello, chap.
Glorious, glorious day. Oh, to you. Bit windy again today. Anyway, back down. This is bloody freezing. Oh, how you doing? Oh, where am I going to put my cup? My table is full of things. As some of you may know, I go walking, I go hiking every Friday morning, every week, whenever possible. And obviously, I have to plan the route. I have to be prepared because the mountains in the Basque Country are not necessarily very high, but the weather is unpredictable. The conditions can change. Accidents happen. So you have to be prepared. When I go hiking, I always take this backpack, this rucksack. It might seem a bit big because I don't walk for hours on end, normally 3 to 5 hours. But I like to be prepared. So, what goes into my backpack? Beautiful day for walking in the miserable wet rain. The first thing that goes into my backpack is my waterproof. This also acts as a wind cheater, like a last layer if it starts to get cold. That always goes in first. And talking about waterproofs, I might also take waterproof trousers. And I always take my camera, or sometimes I take two. I always take a waterproof hat, thank you Guinness, a sun hat, a normal cap. This one's great because it folds. How about that? A woolly hat, a beanie, is to protect my head and my ears. I take a buff, which normally for my neck, but could also be for my ears. A little towel, a power bank with 2 different cables, paracetamol, plasters, sun cream, hand gel, tissues, my inhaler, got a knife, it's a great little knife, I've got a whistle, a compass, I even have an emergency blanket, but that's just really because it doesn't weigh anything. Why not? I have a walking stick. This is a collapsible walking stick. Absolutely fantastic. A second mobile. This is an old mobile that I use as a GPS device. So I don't have to take my phone out all the time. And really importantly, I take this. This is my water. This is a water bladder. Right, I prefer this than taking a bottle of water. Some fruit and nuts for energy while we're walking. And actually it doesn't weigh too much because most of it is really lightweight. And perhaps the heaviest thing is the water and the cameras. When you go walking, what do you take with you? Do you take all that? Probably not, no. I'm a bit over prepared, but hey, why not? Woohoo! It's a bit windy up here. This week's photo is of a friend of mine arriving at the top, at the summit, at the peak of Amboto, which is one of the highest mountains in the Basque Country. It's 1,301 meters high, so it's not a really big mountain, but it offers an amazing view from the top. And it's really hard work to get to the top and to get back down. It's a steep climb up, and then when you get to what you think is the summit, you then have to scramble a few more meters to the top. And if it's wet, if it's cold, if it's windy, it's not a good idea to scramble all the way up to the top. It's quite dangerous. So this leads to this week's question. What is your responsibility when mountaineering? What are you responsible for? And more importantly, who are you responsible for? Yourself, obviously, but what about the other people who've gone climbing and walking with you? Okay, I think I'm ready to go. The last thing I do is attach my camera into my backpack with this handy clip. Have a great day and happy hiking!
Imagine you're freezing, your water is totally gone, and a storm is rolling in, but the peak is like right there. You push forward anyway.
Yeah, it's what climbers call summit fever.
Exactly, which is basically the ultimate, potentially fatal form of FOMO, the fear of missing out on that one final summit push.
Right.
But today, we're taking you on a custom deep dive into a much darker question. Like, if your partner can't keep up and you leave them behind to reach that peak, are you just an ambitious climber, or are you actually a criminal?
That's a heavy question.
It really is. Our mission today is to figure out exactly where the physical risks of the mountain end and the legal liabilities of the courtroom begin. Okay, let's unpack this.
So, to understand how blurry this line has gotten, we really have to look at a devastating case from January 2025 on Austria's highest mountain, the Grossglockner.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah, a woman died of hypothermia after she physically couldn't continue the climb. And her boyfriend, who was much more experienced, just left her behind to summit.
See, this is where I get completely tripped up by the sources, honestly. I mean, the reports say she actually agreed to stay behind, right? Like, she told him to go.
She did, yeah.
Because in a sport built around extreme personal accountability, my instinct is that this just falls under the assumed risk of the mountain. You sign up to climb a deadly peak, you accept the worst-case scenario.
Well, it's really easy to assume that assumption of risk protects the surviving climber. But more than a year later, the boyfriend was actually convicted of gross negligent manslaughter.
Wait, really? Manslaughter?
Yes. And what's fascinating here is how the court defined his responsibility. I mean, they didn't claim he intended to harm her at all.
Okay, so what was the argument then?
They focused entirely on the power dynamic created by his superior experience.
Huh. How do they even prove something as subjective as superior experience in a courtroom?
So they actually look at the hard data, like their respective climbing resumes.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, because he had significantly more logged climbs and technical knowledge. The court basically ruled he had a heightened legal duty to prioritize her safety.
So his expertise meant he should have recognized the severity of her condition and immediately called for help.
Exactly. Regardless of whether she told him to go on or not.
Man, if courts are now ruling that experienced climbers have a legal mandate to protect weaker ones, how is that changing the actual culture on the mountain? Like, are people just refusing to climb together?
Well, the research actually points to this really dark trend called the alpine divorce.
Right. Couples breaking up on the mountain because one partner gets summit fever and refuses to turn around for the slower partner.
Yeah, which completely shatters the unwritten climbing rule that the group always adapts to the pace of the slowest member.
But what happens when that unwritten rule becomes an actual codified law?
Well, Spain provides a perfect example of that shift, actually. They have a legal concept that translates to the omission of the duty of relief.
Okay, and what does that mean practically?
It essentially criminalizes the failure to provide aid. The mechanics of this law are highly specific, though.
Right.
If someone is in clear danger and you can help them, or, at least call for emergency assistance without putting your own life at risk, you are legally obligated to do so.
Wow.
Yeah, authorities determine this by evaluating the weather conditions, your gear, and your proximity to the victim at the time. You don't have to be a hero, but you have a minimum legal obligation to act.
Which completely changes the calculus of a climb. Because if the law practically forces you to pull out your phone and call for a helicopter, what happens when that helicopter lands and hands you a massive bill?
That is the tricky part.
Right, because while Spanish mountain rescues are generally public services and totally free, regions like the Basque Country have started charging for rescues if they determine you were acting out of clear negligence.
Right, like ignoring severe weather warnings or hiking in inappropriate gear.
Yeah. So doesn't the threat of a $50,000 rescue bill make people fatally hesitate? I mean, if you know calling for help might bankrupt you, aren't we ultimately risking more lives by threading that penalty?
Well, this raises a really important question, and it honestly comes down to a delicate balance, because the fear of a massive bill could absolutely cause someone to delay a critical call for help, potentially turning a rescue into a recovery.
Which is terrifying.
It is. On the flip side, though, leaving negligence completely unpenalized drains public resources.
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
Right? We are talking about emergency crews risking their own lives, funded by taxpayers, to save people who simply couldn't be bothered to check a weather app.
Yeah, it's a massive clash between personal freedom and societal cost. The mountaineering community fiercely defends self-reliance, obviously, and they push back hard against strict government control on the trails.
Absolutely.
But the real takeaway from the sources today is that deciding to turn back, deciding to abandon the peak, isn't a failure at all. It is the absolute definition of good judgment.
Yeah, it's about recognizing your limits before the law has to step in and define them for you.
Right. And as this legal landscape shifts, I want to leave you with a new thought to mull over. As the definition of negligence continues to evolve, could simply carrying advanced tech, like a satellite phone or a GPS beacon, actually increase your legal liability in the wilderness?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, if you have the tool, but fail to use it fast enough to save a stranger you pass on the trail, are you suddenly on the hook? So the next time you feel that summit fever pulling you toward the peak, just remember that the heaviest thing in your backpack might not be your gear, but your legal duty to the person standing next to you.
Chat about these questions and write down your opinions and ideas. 1. Describe the picture in as much detail as possible. Do you go walking, hiking, or mountaineering? 2. When you take part in risky activities, how much responsibility should you have for others in the group? 3. Have you ever suffered from summit fever or alpine divorce and anxiety caused by FOMO? 4. Should climbers have to pay for their own rescue? In what situations would that be fair or unfair? And what about ambulances when people get injured playing other sports, such as football, basketball, etc.? 5. Describe the natural areas around where you live. Do you visit them? Are they protected in any way?